Hello, I'm Matt Gillard. Thank you for joining us for this week's edition of Capital Corner, the news about early childhood from your state capital here in Lansing. Well, it's been an interesting week in Lansing, to say the least. The legislature is really starting to get rolling on the fiscal year 2012 budget. Early this week, a deal was announced on the revenue side and the tax structure change side between Senate Majority Leader Richard Ville, Speaker Jace Bolger, and Governor Rick Snyder. If you remember in past weeks, this has been a big point of contention, with the legislature not necessarily agreeing with the governor's tax change proposals, which obviously have a dramatic impact on his proposal for the fiscal year 2012 budget. The deal that was announced certainly hasn't been voted on by the full legislature yet, but the fact that the Majority Leader and the Speaker both agreed with the governor to a deal signals that, in all likelihood, we're going to see that deal come to fruition. The deal includes a hybrid version of the pension tax that the governor proposed, which will impact seniors in different ways depending upon the year they were born, but it does not raise the overall amount of money that the governor's proposal would have raised. It does adopt the governor's huge tax break to businesses, however, so that will leave about $150 million short of what the governor had proposed for the budgets that will ultimately get enacted. That means the budgets that the legislature has to pass will have to include $150 million in additional cuts from what the governor had proposed. This is obviously a big concern to any folks, early childhood advocates and others, that are concerned about the level of state spending on various programs, including early childhood. So with that deal announced, we did start to see some of these bills, or some of these legislative budget bills, move out of subcommittees this week. Particularly to the early childhood issues, we saw bills move out of both the House and Senate Department of Human Services appropriations subcommittees. On the House side, on Wednesday afternoon, late Wednesday afternoon, the House DHS, Department of Human Services Subcommittee, did report out a bill with some significant reductions over what the governor's proposal was, and certainly major reductions over what current year spending levels are for Department of Human Services activities. In particular, to early childhood programs, the House bill eliminates the 0 to 3 secondary prevention program funds and also issues a cut of $750,000 to the Early Childhood Investment Corporation, which receives funding under the DHS budget. It also goes along with the governor's proposal to reduce the rates for unlicensed, unregulated daycare providers from $1.65 to $1.30 an hour, and also recognizes another and that saves about $13.9 million. Then it recognizes another $10 million in savings by capping the maximum number of reimbursable hours on child daycare providers in the subsidy program as well. Overall, these compile a list of significant reductions to early childhood programs and would really be a challenge on working families in Michigan. But that's the good news, unfortunately. On the Senate side, on Thursday afternoon, the Senate Department of Human Services Subcommittee reported out a bill with dramatically even further reductions in funding for early childhood programs. They agreed with essentially all of the House versions in the governor's proposals, including elimination of the 0 to 3 secondary prevention programs and others, but they went even further on the child daycare and child development and care program. The Senate proposal reduces child development and care funding by $36.5 million in an unspecified manner, really, and it requires the department to report out a plan on how they would meet that goal or meet that reduction. The Senate proposal also completely eliminates funding for the Early Childhood Investment Corporation. And so that would mean that the quality program that is run by the Early Childhood Investment Corporation on the Child Development and Care program would have to go back in-house to the department, and really in an unknown way. These are significant reductions, not just to the Early Childhood Investment Corporation, but to early childhood interests in general. And so it's important to remember that this is just the first step in the budget process, and there will be much more debate and discussion as we move through this in Lansing. But it certainly was a challenging week, I think, for early childhood advocates everywhere in light of what is happening right now. Please come join us again next week and stay tuned as this development furthers in Lansing and as hopefully we have some better news to report in the future.